Hi everyone. So last class I had all this technological issues, um, and video three cut short early. So instead of going on as we planned to the War of 1812, I just have a short video to finish up where we left off. So we were discussing Jefferson is in office and the Jeffersonian Vision, how he believed expanding the United States west was going to promote um, and a more equal and a more democratic society to confront the ills that came from industrialization, which especially was on the coasts. And this is the St. Louis Arch in St. Louis, which is sort of like the gateway to that west. And we're going to keep doing some map work so we have a better idea of where St. Louis is located, the rivers that go through it. This is where Lewis and Clark left from and all that sort of stuff. So now we're going to get on to the Louisiana Purchase. So once again, thinking that agrarian democracy would come by expansion, one of Jefferson's biggest accomplishments was to buy the Louisiana Territory in 1803. This just about doubled the nation's size. So in 1800, Spain ceded this big trans-Mississippi region called Louisiana at the time. Louisiana referred to what's beyond the state of Louisiana today, just a little FYI. But anyway, Spain ceded that area to France. Now, Jefferson thought this was ridiculous, and he thought that this was evidence that the European nations still wanted this American territory, and he wanted no part of that. In 1802, in the fall, a Spanish commander at New Orleans, which was Spain at the time, closed the Mississippi to American commerce. So this further upset Jefferson. Spain's actions were raising this frustration, both in Washington, where the government was dealing with these relations, and in the West, where people were trying to expand to. So in January of 1803, the president sent James Monroe. There's an image of him there. He was another one of a protege, if you will, from Washington and Madison, another Virginian. I just read a big book on Monroe that was pretty interesting, but I won't give you all the quotes on him now. But he went to Paris with instructions to purchase New Orleans and also West Florida, which had a really important harbor on the Gulf Coast, Mobile, or however people down there call it. Monroe was surprised to find that Napoleon was ready to sell all of Louisiana, basically, but not West Florida. So, faced with a renewed threat of war against England, as well as a rebellion that was going on against French rule in Haiti, you should have learned about that last year. Napoleon also feared that Americans were going to go west anyway, and that he would not be able to keep American settlers out. So in April, they reached a deal. And for $15 million, the U.S. obtained 830,000 square miles of this new territory. Now, Federalists were not pleased about this. They thought that the states that would be carved out would be staunchly Jeffersonian, right? This agricultural kind of idea. And you know what? They were. They worried that a expanding frontier would also decivilize the country, right? They're not going to act the way the people in the more established metropolitan or even established agricultural areas in the states. But expansion didn't even stop here. In 1810, Americans formed a revolt in Spanish West Florida. I have this right here. And they proclaimed an independent republic. 2 years after that, even though Spain objected, Congress annexed that region. So the Adams-Onis Treaty, you see that in the map over here, it's also known as the Transcontinental Treaty. And if you think of it as the Transcontinental Treaty, it makes more sense because now we are going across the whole continent. So this was 1819. Spain ceded East Florida down here as well. And as part of this agreement, the U.S. extended its territory to extend its territorial claims to even parts of the Pacific Northwest. Now, this doesn't mean this was all like civilized area yet. If you want to use that term, it wasn't. This was still a lot of native territory. But now these didn't become just states all of a sudden. But now we had this frontier that would last. The census said the frontier closed in 1890. So now for decades and decades, people could move out west. Opening it wasn't easy. It was basically to serve the needs of the agrarian nation. To do it, it'd have to be explored, it'd have to be prepared. So in the summer of 1803, Jefferson dispatched an expedition led by his secretary Meriwether Lewis and an Army officer, William Clark, to explore all this vast Northwest, to make contact with Native Americans there, to open up the fur trade, to bring back scientific information. Jefferson just loved acquiring all that sort of scientific and natural information. So for basically 2.5 years, these explorers, assisted by Sacagawea, made their way across thousands of miles of terrain. Some was unmapped, some was hostile. And they went up the Missouri River, through the Rocky Mountains, down the Columbia to the Pacific coast, and then back again. So those should be features that you put on that last map. Some people miss that, so you probably want to go back to that. And they finally came back to St. Louis, right, in September of 1806. Lewis and Clark's journey really increased American interest in this trans-Mississippi West and demonstrated that it could be done, that we can find a route to the Pacific and we could establish these areas. You also have the Pike expedition of 1805 and 1806. They explored the sources of the Mississippi River. That was in northern Minnesota. They took a bold venture into the Rockies. That's where Pike's Peak is. And in the following decade, the government established a string of military posts from Minnesota to Arkansas, all intended to secure the frontier, to promote the fur trade, and to support white settlement of the area. So this is basically Jefferson's blueprint, right? And it also guided changes to federal land policy. Federalists viewed public land as a commodity to be sold as a way of generating government revenue. Remember, the Federalists wanted this revenue. The Jeffersonians were more concerned about speeding its settlement and getting people there quickly to establish it. So the Land Act of 1801 reduced the minimum purchase from 640 acres to you could purchase just 320 acres. It also established a credit system, and it offered discounts for cash sales to try to promote this settlization. Over the next year and a half, settlers, speculators, land companies bought more than 4 times as much federal land as it did during the entire 1790s. So Jefferson's policy fostered all this speculation. It contributed to the Panic of 1819 economically, which we'll probably get to later. But it speeded the privatization of public land. And now you also have this nation that becomes sort of broken into regions, whether it's the Northeast, the South, Trans-Appalachia, things like that. And you also get into relations with the natives on a much larger scale now as well. So we're going to pick up this and talk about the War of 1812 next, but I want you to get a little bit more familiar with this geography before we keep moving on. If you have any questions on this, I know I didn't have notes on what I just talked about. Just let me know and we can discuss it. All right, let me end this and I'll see you. Oops. I'm still not working with my computer if you haven't noticed. Close. All right, see you.